In 2018, the Trump administration launched a series of tariffs targeting goods from China, Canada, and Mexico. This marked a significant shift in U.S. trade policy. President Trump argued that these tariffs were necessary to protect American jobs and industries. He believed that unfair trade practices from these countries were harming the U.S. economy. One of the primary goals was to reduce the U.S. trade deficit, which Trump viewed as a sign of economic weakness. The Trump administration implemented a 25% tariff on steel imports and a 10% tariff on aluminum imports from most countries, including Canada and Mexico. These tariffs, justified on the grounds of national security, strained relations with long-standing allies. Tensions with China escalated further as the U.S. imposed tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. These tariffs targeted a wide range of products, from electronics to clothing. The stated aim was to pressure China to change its trade practices, which the U.S. considered unfair. These tariffs represented a significant escalation in trade tensions between the U.S. and its major trading partners. The administration argued that these measures were necessary to protect American interests and level the playing field. However, critics argued that these tariffs would harm American consumers, raise prices, and disrupt global supply chains. The tariffs sparked immediate retaliation from China, Canada, and Mexico, who imposed their own tariffs on U.S. goods. The situation quickly escalated into a trade war, with each side imposing further tariffs in response to the other's actions. This tit-for-tat exchange had a ripple effect throughout the global economy, creating uncertainty and disrupting established trade flows. The tariffs became a defining feature of Trump's presidency, impacting businesses and consumers alike. The tariffs imposed by the Trump administration had a significant economic impact on both the United States and its trading partners. In the U.S., businesses and consumers faced higher costs due to the tariffs on imported goods. The tariffs disrupted supply chains, leading to delays and increased costs for businesses. American consumers saw prices rise for a variety of goods, from washing machines to automobiles. China, Canada, and Mexico, targeted by the U.S. tariffs, retaliated with tariffs of their own on American goods. This retaliation further strained trade relations and hurt American exporters. American farmers, particularly those producing soybeans and pork, were hit hard by Chinese retaliatory tariffs. The agricultural sector experienced significant losses as exports to China plummeted. The tariffs also had a broader impact on the global economy. The trade war between the U.S. and China created uncertainty and volatility in global markets. Businesses became more cautious about investment and hiring, slowing economic growth. The International Monetary Fund downgraded its global growth forecasts in response to the escalating trade tensions. The tariffs imposed by the Trump administration had a mixed impact on the U.S. trade deficit. While the deficit with China did decrease slightly, the overall trade deficit for the U.S. increased. This suggests that the tariffs were not effective in achieving their stated goal of reducing the trade deficit. Moreover, the tariffs led to job losses in certain sectors of the U.S. economy, particularly in manufacturing. The Trump administration made some modifications to the tariffs over time. Some products were granted exemptions from the tariffs, while others saw tariff rates adjusted. The U.S. also reached a trade agreement with Canada and Mexico, known as the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. This agreement replaced the North American Free Trade Agreement. Under the USMCA, some of the tariffs on steel and aluminum were lifted. However, the USMCA also introduced new rules and regulations that have had mixed impacts on businesses and trade. The trade war with China saw periods of both escalation and de-escalation. In 2020, the U.S. and China signed a Phase 1 trade deal, which included commitments from China to increase purchases of U.S. goods. However, many of the tariffs imposed during the trade war remain in place today, even after the change in administration. The Biden administration has maintained many of the Trump-era tariffs, citing the need to protect American jobs and leverage in negotiations with China. The ongoing tariffs continue to impact businesses and consumers and are a source of tension in U.S.-China relations. The future of these tariffs remains uncertain. The Biden administration has indicated a willingness to engage in trade negotiations with China, but it is unclear whether these negotiations will lead to a significant reduction in tariffs. The tariffs imposed by the Trump administration have had a lasting impact on global trade, and continue to shape the trade landscape today. The tariffs imposed by the Trump administration represent a significant shift in U.S. trade policy, the long-term effects of which are still being debated. While the stated goals of the tariffs were to protect American jobs, reduce the trade deficit, and address unfair trade practices, the extent to which these goals were achieved is debatable. The tariffs did lead to some changes in trade flows and forced trading partners to the negotiating table. However, they also resulted in higher costs for businesses and consumers, disrupted global supply chains, and fueled uncertainty in the global economy. The tariffs also had a mixed impact on the U.S. trade deficit, which ultimately did not decrease as intended. The tariffs strained relations with key allies like Canada and Mexico, although the USMCA did lead to some resolutions on trade issues. The trade war with China exposed the complexities of the global trading system and the challenges of using tariffs as a tool to achieve specific economic objectives. The long-term consequences of these tariffs, including their impact on innovation, global supply chains, and the future of multilateral trade, remain to be seen. The Biden administration faces the challenge of navigating the legacy of these tariffs while pursuing its own trade agenda. Addressing the underlying issues that drove the implementation of these tariffs, such as concerns over intellectual property theft and forced technology transfer, will require a multifaceted approach that goes beyond tariffs alone. The future of global trade will likely be shaped by how effectively countries can address these challenges and find ways to cooperate on trade while addressing legitimate concerns about fairness and reciprocity.